McDavid. Moves in, McDavid goes upstairs! What a goal!
Hey guys! How's it going? It's Etanyos here. Welcome to this series finale of the Edmonton Oilers wrap-up here on my channel. It has been a grind to get through this series. I know you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed recording it, and this last episode is going to be me grinding through 11 more seasons, getting all the screenshots compiled and narrated and ready for you guys to binge through. They're really, quickly set up seasons for the most part, but there was 11 seasons, so that's why this video is as long as it is. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoy. It has been a real awesome series here, and please go down below, drop the like if you do enjoy. Takes just a second. Also subscribe if you haven't, do all that good stuff to help out my channel here, and that's going to be it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. So guys, heading into the 2034 NHL entry draft, the Edmonton Oilers would make a blockbuster move with the Washington Capitals to obtain the first overall pick to draft Duke Bickell. The Oilers would send Alex Mara, Perreault, their first round pick in 2036, Pat Smith-Pelly, and Mario Vigneault to Washington in exchange for this number 1 overall pick. The Oilers would also make another move at the draft that would see them land the 35th overall pick in the second round, and in exchange they would send the Los Angeles Kings Johan Eriksson and Walker Gibbons. Edmonton would land a couple great players in this draft. The names to watch especially would consist of Duke Bickell, Lance Sakic, and Sean Tanabe there. So for the 2034 re-signing phase in the offseason, the Oilers would sign every single player you can see on screen right now. All the contracts were offered, as well as for the goalies, big names such as Parbacker, Ernesto Bennington, Korolyuk, and Spencer Roach. So heading into free agency, the Oilers would make yet another huge move, sending 5 more pieces over to a different team, this time being the Nashville Predators, where Carson Lambos, Ernesto Bennington, Dmitry Zubov, Dahlman, and Pedro Chipchura would get shipped off to the Nashville Predators in exchange for Noah Huxley, a player who is locked up on a 7-year, $12.22 million contract, who fit Edmonton's top line. The Oilers would also sign Vasily Ponomarev in free agency as a nice depth piece and a two-way forward to fill out the bottom 6. So for the 2034/35 season, this is how the Edmonton Oilers roster would look, with Huxley, Bickell, and Ribeiro on the top line, Yamamoto, Matthews, and Eves sticking together on the second line with the +3 chemistry boost. Sanford, Ponomarev, and Vignetti would be running on the third line with Carcillo, Halvardson, and Roach again on that fourth line with the +3 boost. On defense, we would see the +5 combo again with Boris Korolyuk and Evan Bouchard. Brian Altshuler and Vitaly Bure would be on the second pairing, and then Tomi Niittymaki and Oscar Silvegaard would be on the third pairing. In net, the Oilers would have Parbacker yet again, backed up by Lane Pacioretty this year, and your captains would consist of William Eves, Kyler Yamamoto, and then Evan Bouchard would be getting the C for this upcoming season. So in this 2034/35 season, the Edmonton Oilers would have 98 offense, 88 defense, and 89 goaltending as their team ratings. And to wrap up the 2034/35 season, the Edmonton Oilers would produce an absolutely fantastic record of 63, 14, and 5 for 131 points, finishing first in the league for yet another season. I believe this is 6 in a row now that the Oilers have won. Actually, no, 7. That's even more insane. Anyways, Austin Matthews leads the team with 101 points, but William Eves scores 59 goals on the season and 99 points. Evan Bouchard, don't miss him there, 94 points as a defenseman and the captain of the team there. And then Colby Lacosta for the Pittsburgh Penguins leads the league with 112 points. You can see Austin Matthews down at the bottom there. So in the playoffs, the Edmonton Oilers managed to make it through the entire Western Conference to the finals where they would beat the Boston Bruins in 7 games. They go on a crazy cup run, and you get to see Evan Bouchard lift the cup there for the Oilers after Game 7. The Utica Comets win the Calder Cup this year as the Bakersfield Condors were knocked out in the first round by the Tucson Roadrunners. So for the draft lottery, the Toronto Maple Leafs moved from pick 5 to 1 to win the lottery, and also a franchise potential winger as a left-wing playmaker named Ulf Olsson. As far as retiring players go, we see Nathan MacKinnon, David Pastrnak, Mikko Rantanen, Sebastian Aho, Sam Reinhart, Jake Gensel, Dylan Larkin, and Eli Tolvanen, all with over 1,000 points retiring there. Nathan MacKinnon, one of the top scorers of all time there. He's sitting probably right around 4th place on that list. That wasn't it for the draft or for the retirees. Lots of big names, as you can see, from Dominic Cahoon and further down. All of these players had over 750 points, so a very big name retiree class. And we also see players by the names of, or goalies by the names of Ilya Samsonov, Igor Shesterkin, and Philip Gustafsson, as well as Tristan Jarry and Michael DiPietro, all with over 290 wins each. So a big goaltender retiree class this year too. As far as awards go, we see the Art Ross go to Colby LaCosta there for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Evan Bouchard wins the Hart Memorial Trophy, as well as his 3rd Norris in a row. Evan Bouchard going off. Pedro Chipchura wins the Lady Byng this year. Duke Bickle with the Calder Trophy for the Oilers there. Noah Huxley wins the Conn Smythe after the playoffs. Parbacker wins yet another Vezina, and Backer and Pacioretty also win the William M. Jennings there. The Masterton goes to Pilar in Philadelphia. The Jack Adams goes to LA's coach in Kennedy there. The Selke goes again to Reitz in Arizona. Bouchard wins another Ted Lindsay, and William Eaves wins the Rocket this year. So guys, heading into the 2035 NHL entry draft now, the Edmonton Oilers would make a trade sending Nickerson as well as Jameson Ross to Philadelphia in exchange for the 25th overall pick and Dietz there as the goalie just to balance out the trade. In the draft, Edmonton would select players notably by the names of Stephen Mitchell, Pedersen, Huutonen, and Zanetti. Those would be a few names to watch there from the Edmonton Oilers this year. So contracts were offered to all the players expiring. The only player who did not sign their contract was Kyler Yamamoto, who the Oilers were going to try to pursue in free agency. So since the Oilers didn't have enough cap space, they would ship off Vasily Ponomarev, Huutonen, and a 3rd round pick to the Colorado Avalanche in exchange for Zykov. Also, the Oilers would hire a new coach in place of Abel Rhodes this year. Rhodes would be fired, and a new system would be put in place. So for the Oilers lineup, you can see Huxley, Bickle, Eaves, Zykov, Matthews, Ribeiro, Sanford, Viggetti, Mitchell, Halvardson, Martikainen, and Spencer Roach. For the forwards on defense, the Oilers would be running with Kolyuk and Bure, then Bouchard and Silvegaard, and then finally Niittymaki and Altschuler. And in goal, Parbacker yet again would be running the crease with Lane Pacioretty backing him up. So guys, for the 2035-36 regular season, the Edmonton Oilers would post a record of 54, 23, and 5 for the best in the league, 113 points there, and also their 8th straight President's Trophy win. William Eaves would lead the Oilers with 105 points, 55 goals, and 50 assists. Duke Bickle right on his tail there with 43 goals, 49 assists for 92 points. And as you can see there, William Eaves would finish 4th in league scoring behind Nurmi, Brunette, and Redden. So heading into the playoffs, the Edmonton Oilers would make it past the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, beating the Vegas Golden Knights in 5 and then sweeping the San Jose Sharks. But they would finally meet their match as the Arizona Coyotes would beat the Oilers in 7 and go on to win the Stanley Cup in 5 games against the Philadelphia Flyers. In the AHL, the Ontario Reign would be your Calder Cup winners this year. And as far as the lottery goes, St. Louis would move from 4 to 1, Buffalo from 7 to 3, and those are the only significant lottery moves this year. For retirees, we would see Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner retire at the same time. Lots of players with over 1,000 points. Austin Matthews being the most notable with 906 goals on his career too, and an Edmonton retiree at this point. We would also see players by the names of Alex Nylander, Travis Konechny, sorry, not Thomas, Martin Necas, Tyson Jost, and Clayton Keller all finish with over 1,000 points. A bunch of notable players with at least 900 points in their career as well. For individual awards, Mika Nurmi would win the Art Ross, William Eves with the Hart, Quinn Hughes with the Norris, Lady Byng would go to Nurmi as well, Olason in Toronto would win the Calder, Reitz would win the Conn Smythe, Janaway would win the Vezina this year, Witherspoon would win the Jennings, Lamb would win the Masterton, Washington's coach would win the Jack Adams, Perez again with the Selke, the Ted Lindsay would go to Eves as well, and Hirvonen would win the Rocket this year. So guys, heading into the 2036 NHL entry draft, the Edmonton Oilers would trade Pettersson to Anaheim for the 13th overall pick, as well as they would trade the elite goaltender Kuhlman to the Los Angeles Kings in exchange for the 43rd overall pick, even though I did miss that screenshot. So for the draft, the notable names would consist of Ashton Ludeman as well as Felix Gerber, the top two picks there at 13 and 34. Those players would turn out to be very good players for the Oilers in upcoming years. As far as the re-sign phase goes, all the players were offered contracts here, including Evan Bouchard, as you can see, as well as a lot of depth guys and goaltenders by the names of Lane Pacioretty, as well as Reed McAllister. For rookies, Ashton Ludeman, Felix Gerber, and Dane Zanetti would all get contract offers as well. So heading into 2036 free agency, the Edmonton Oilers would ship off Noah Huxley as well as their first-round pick for 2037 to the Arizona Coyotes in exchange for Tristan Hedeken, an ex-Oilers defenseman, as well as Arizona's first-round pick for 2037 and Dylan Strome for cap space reasons. The Edmonton Oilers would immediately turn around and send Dylan Strome to the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for a third and fourth round pick in the upcoming draft. So with all this cap space cleared, the Edmonton Oilers would go out in free agency and sign a better fitting center by the name of Brad Lambert at 32 years old, who was extremely happy to accept that offer. So heading into the 2036-37 regular season, the Edmonton Oilers would be running their lines consisting of William Eves, Brad Lambert, Duke Bickle. Second line would have Ribeiro, Sanford, and Mitchell. The third line would have Viggetti, Gerber, and Zykov, and the fourth line would have Helverdson, Martikainen, and Afinogenov. On defense, Coral Eukenbure would be paired up on the top line again this year. Oscar Silvegaard as well as Tristan Hedeken would be running the second pairing, and on the third pairing, Tomi Niittymaki as well as Ashton Ludeman would be on the bottom two. For goaltending, yet again, we would see Parbacker and Lane Pacioretty in the crease for the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers' offense, defense, and goaltending would consist of ratings of 95, 85, and 89 for this upcoming season. So for the 2036-37 regular season, the Edmonton Oilers would put up a record of 51, 23, and 8 for 110 points, finishing fourth in the NHL in the regular season. Brad Lambert would lead the team this year with 21 goals and 82 assists for 103 points, and Brad Lambert would finish about 10th or 11th place in the NHL for scoring this year. For the 2037 Stanley Cup playoffs, the Edmonton Oilers would beat the Sharks in 7 games, then the Dallas Stars in 7 games, before finally losing to the Nashville Predators in the conference finals in 6, and the Predators would go on to lose to the eventual Stanley Cup champions, the New Jersey Devils, in 6 games. In the AHL, the Springfield Thunderbirds would go all the way, beating the Colorado Eagles in 5 games in the Calder Cup final. For individual awards this year, Haynes would win the Art Ross in Detroit as well as the Hart Trophy there. Vincent Guiton, ex-Oilers defenseman, would win the Norris in New Jersey. The Lady Byng would go to Nurmi this year. Vetterl would win the Calder. The Conn Smythe would go to Armstrong. The Vezina would go to Poirier, and as well as the Jennings. Lukowich would win the Masterton. New York's coach would win the Jack Adams. Perez again would win another back-to-back Selke there. Haynes would win the Lindsay, and Hirvonen would win back-to-back Rockets. So for the draft lottery, the Blue Jackets would move up from 2-1, the Hurricanes from 8-2, and the Golden Knights from 5-3. The Oilers pick would also land at number 6 there from Arizona, and this would be a key piece to the upcoming draft. As far as retirees go, we would see players by the name of Matthew Tkachuk, Brock Besser, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Brady Tkachuk, Rasmus Dahlin finish with over 1,000 points, Farabee, Doc, Shabbat all with over 900, and Heiskanen just falling short, as well as Evan Bouchard, who would finally retire this year at 37 years old, posting 890 points in 1,222 career NHL games. So guys, heading into the 2037 NHL entry draft, the Edmonton Oilers, coming up short yet again in the playoffs, would be looking to add another big name piece to the team here. They would offer to the Columbus Blue Jackets for the first overall pick, the 6th overall pick from Arizona, Brad Lambert, Atkinson, Motzko, and a first-round pick next year in exchange for the first overall pick in the 2037 entry draft, Doughty, and Rammer for cap space reasons. So the Oilers would select Cody Zinger, an 82-rated franchise power forward center, with the first overall pick, their second first overall pick in the last 4 years to really rebuild this Oilers dynasty. The other names to watch there would be Ballet as well as Sonnenberg. Kapanen as well, the 7th round pick there at pick 222 would also be a name to watch. In the re-sign phase, the Oilers would offer contracts to everybody except for the players by the names of Zykov as well as Lane Pacioretty. Also, one of the weirdest statistics I think I'd ever seen, a 66 overall low top 9 power forward in the name of Darren Jacquizzi would put up 79 goals in 82 games in the AHL this season. In free agency, the Edmonton Oilers would sign Kyler Yamamoto back on a cheaper contract this year, and this would really help to improve the Oilers' team chemistry again. So heading into the 2038/39 season, the Edmonton Oilers would be running a lineup consisting of Eves, Gerber, and Bickle on the top line, Ribeiro, Halvardson, and Yamamoto on the second, Sanford, Zinger, and Mitchell on the third, and then Afinogenov, Martikainen, and Roach on the third for forwards. On defense, we would see Boris Korliuk beside Bure, then Ludeman with Silvegaard, and then Niittymaki with Hedekin this year. In net, we would have Parbacker yet again at 33 years old now, backed up by McKenzie this year. And the Oilers' team ratings would consist of 95 offense, 86 defense, and 87 goaltending this season. For the 2037/38 regular season, the Edmonton Oilers would produce a record of 58-23-1 for 117 points, winning yet another President's Trophy. For team scoring this year, we would see William Eves put up 117 points at 31 years old. Duke Bickle would produce a 50-goal season with 105 points, and Vitaly Bure would score 72 as an offensive defenseman this year. So Oscar Magnusson would be the league's top scorer with 128 points. William Eves would finish third. Another notable name, Pedro Chipchura, finishing fourth. He is playing in Nashville now, though, even though he was an Oilers drafted player. So, guys, for the 2038 NHL playoffs, the Edmonton Oilers would go all the way this year, winning the first round in 7 against Dallas, sweeping the Pylons in the second round there, and then beating the St. Louis Blues in 7 games in the conference finals before going on to beat the Washington Capitals in 6 games. And there you can see William Eves lifting the Stanley Cup for the first time after becoming Edmonton Oilers captain, and that's just a great sight to see. In the AHL, the Hershey Bears would win the Calder Cup this year, beating the Colorado Eagles in 6 games. And for the draft this season, Anaheim would maintain the first overall pick. Carolina and Colorado would move from 13-2 and 12-3. As far as retirees go, we would see Patrick Laine finish his career with 1,020 goals. Just an absolutely crazy career there from Laine. Also 1,886 points. Every player on this list here who would have 1,000 points, as you can see. And we would also have players by the names of Mittelstadt, Raymond, Gallant, and a couple other notable names in there scoring lots of points in their NHL careers. For goaltenders, we would see Carter Hart being the most notable name to retire, 998 games played and 576 wins in his career, an absolute Hall of Fame goaltender. For awards, we would see Magnuson win the Art Ross this year, as well as the Hart. Vitaly Bure would win the Norris this year, Pedro Chepchura with the Lady Byng, Cody Zinger would win the Calder, William Eves would win the Conn Smythe, Parbacker would win the Vezina, as well as the Jennings along with McKenzie there. Nielsen would win the Masterton, and then Minnesota's coach would win the Jack Adams. Oda would win the Selke this year, and Magnuson with the Lindsay, as well as Kari Hirvonen 3 years in a row with the Rocket. So guys, for the 2038 NHL entry draft, it was a very weak draft overall, and the Oilers just didn't have anybody worth highlighting in that draft. Not many trades or anything else happened there either. So on to the re-sign phase. All the players you can see on screen were offered contracts here, and all of those players did re-sign. In the offseason here, the Oilers actually went after and got, I believe it was... So apparently, guys, I just missed a whole bunch of screenshots, but the Oilers did sign Yanni Yakola in free agency, an old Edmonton goaltender that we needed as a backup because really this team didn't have a great goaltending for backup goaltending. As far as trades go, the Oilers did end up moving Russ Ribeiro for 2 second-round picks from St. Louis over the next 2 years. And this was more just to clear some cap space and allow the team to have some flexibility with signing more depth players, because Ribeiro was actually going to be sitting out of the lineup this year just based on how strong it got. So for Edmonton's offense, the forwards would be looking like this year. We would have Eves, Gerber, and Bickle on the first line, Tanabe, Zinger, and Mitchell on the second line, Tyutin, Sanford, and Halvardson on the third, and then Afinogenov, Martikainen, and Roach on the third. On defense, Korliuk and Bure again, Ludeman and Silvegaard this year, and then Niittymaki and Hedikin. And then in net, Parbacker down to an 87 overall, and Yanni Yakola would be an 83 overall. So Edmonton would be bolstering ratings of 98 offense, 87 defense, and 88 goaltending heading into the next season. So guys, the Edmonton Oilers would have a down year this season, putting up a record of 42, 34, and 6 for just 90 points on the year, finishing 20th in the NHL and missing the playoffs for the first time in about 12 to 15 seasons. William Eves would go off, though, this season, putting up 129 points on the year. Duke Bickle would lead the team in goals with 53, as well as 110 points there. And then for the entire league, William Eves was head and shoulders above the second-place player there in Knuble, who had 115. It wasn't even close. So for the 2039 playoffs, the Boston Bruins would win the Stanley Cup, going through the East fairly easily, only really struggling with New Jersey and then sweeping the Colorado Avalanche in the finals. For the AHL, the Rochester Americans would win the Calder Cup in 6 games against the Henderson Silver Knights this year. And in the draft, we would see the New York Rangers land the first overall pick all the way from the 12th best odds. Florida would move down 1, Dallas would remain at 3rd. As far as retiring players go this year, we would see William Nylander end up with 1,724 points, actually one of the highest assist totals in NHL history there as well, with 1,261 assists. Other notable players would consist of Elias Pettersson. Kyler Yamamoto would also retire there this season with 1,429 points in 1,515 games. Other notable names consisted of LaRue, Kaliev, McLennan, and so on there, as you can see. So because Edmonton finished so low this year, we'll look through the team awards as well. The Capitals would win the President's Trophy, the Bruins obviously with the Cup, Colorado with the Campbell, and Boston with the Prince of Wales. For individual awards, William Eves would win the Art Ross as well as the Hart Memorial Trophy. Foster would win the Norris this year. In Boston, Chip Chura would win yet another Lady Byng, which is just crazy. Sauve would win the Calder. The Conn Smythe would go to LaCosta. Kolzig would win the Vezina this year. Kolzig and Olas would also win the Jennings together there. Cashman would win the Masterton this year. Calgary's coach would win the Adams. Oda would win back-to-back Selkies. Eves would win the Ted Lindsay. And Petrel would win the Rocket. So heading into the 2039 NHL entry draft, the Edmonton Oilers would land a couple big-name players by the names of Walters, Hobson, Hennessy, as well as Kiloma. Those guys all players to watch heading into the future, especially Walters being a high elite goaltender. In the re-sign phase, everybody would re-sign with the Oilers, as well as the Oilers would have additional cap space after the Ribeiro move. Connor Perreault would be Edmonton's target from the Washington Capitals, who was a trade piece back in the Duke Bickell move. But we would offer Perreault an RFA offer sheet of $7.8 million for the next 2 years, which he would end up accepting. So heading into the 2039/40 season, the Edmonton Oilers would have a lineup looking like this, with Eves, Gerber, Bickell on the top line again, Tanabe, Zinger, Mitchell on the second, Sanford, Sakic, and Kauppanen finally making the team on the third line there, then Helvertson, Martikainen, and Tayutin on the fourth. On defense, we would see Korolyuk and Bure on the top pairing yet again, Hedekin and Silvegaard on the second, and Altschuler and Ludeman on the third. And then in net, we would have Connor Perreault as the starter and Reed McAllister making the backup role this year. The Oilers' offense, defense, and goaltending would consist of 96 overall offense, 86 defense, and 85 goaltending. Another trade we did make here is we finally moved Parbacker after like 10 seasons with the Oilers or something along those lines. He was fantastic, but we move him at 81 overall to the Boston Bruins for a 4th and a 5th round pick. So for the 2039/40 regular season, the Edmonton Oilers would put up a record of 43, 31, and 8 for 94 points. Not the greatest record there, still finishing 13th in the league, so not a bad place, but a couple teams like Philadelphia did get screwed just based on stronger conferences. For team scoring, Duke Bickell would go off this year, putting up 126 points, 51 goals, 75 assists. William Eves would lead the team with 54 goals, as well as have 101 points. Vitaly Bure over a point per game as a defenseman with 89 there as well. For league scoring, Duke Bickell was again head and shoulders above the league. We had the LaCosta brothers, by the looks of it, on different teams, putting up 115 and 114 points there, so that's just crazy to see. In the playoffs this year, the Edmonton Oilers would somehow make it all the way to the conference finals, beating the Kings in 7, then the Sharks in 7, and finally losing in 7 to the Colorado Avalanche, who would go on to sweep the Toronto Maple Leafs in the Stanley Cup Finals. In the AHL, the Henderson Silver Knights would redeem themselves after losing in the finals last year and beat the Rochester Americans in 7 games there to win the Calder Cup. For the draft lottery, the Vancouver Canucks would move from 8-1 to win their first ever number 1 overall pick. Dallas would move from 6-2, and Minnesota would move from 4-3. As far as retiring players go, we would see players by the names of Rusko Atsirati, Shane Wright, Antonio Stranges, Lasse Numanen, and Cole Sillinger all put up over 1,000 points in their career. Couple big name players there, especially Rusko with the 730 career goals there. Just a great player overall. In goal, Joakim Jakola being the big name goaltender there, who would just really have a great career, 406 wins. Foote would have 373, Alnefelt would have 299, Callanan with 291, and yeah, a couple notable goalies in there. So this year for player awards, we would see Duke Bickell win the Art Ross Trophy. He would also win the Hart this year. Vitaly Bure would win another Norris Trophy. Nurmi would win the Lady Byng this year. The Calder would go to Stepniak in New York. Arttu Jurkin would win the Conn Smythe for the Avalanche there. Dice would win the Vezina Trophy this year. McFarland and Backer would win the Jennings, though, in Boston. Cairns would win the Masterton in New York. Mika Barkov, Edmonton's coach, would win the Adams. Reitz would win the Selke this year. And then Duke Bickell with the Ted Lindsay, and LeBlanc would win the Rocket. So guys, heading into the 2040 NHL entry draft, the Edmonton Oilers would make a fairly big move, sending Sonnenberg, the 61st overall pick, Kim, and Griffith to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for the 8th overall pick, the 39th overall pick, 103rd, 96th pick, and also shoots just for player and roster reasons. The Oilers then would also trade Halverson, Niittymaki, and 2 third-round picks, so some slower end but high money deals to the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for Chandler Austin, a two-way left wing forward. So from the draft, the notable names would be Albrecht, even though he would not actually fit our defensive core. Sloan, being an offensive defenseman, looked very good. Tellqvist and McDermott were actually elite players, so they turned out very well as Hunwick being an elite goalie. So for the re-sign phase, we did have some issues here as we signed everybody and gave them offers except for Duke Bickle, who was definitely a bit of a pain in the ass when it came to contract negotiating. We would end up sending Oscar Silvegaard and Brian Altshuler to the Vancouver Canucks for a 2nd and a 4th round pick to clear up more cap space to re-sign Bickle in free agency. Heading into the 2040/41 regular season, the Edmonton Oilers lineup would consist of this, as we would see Mitchell, Zinger, and Bickle on the first line, Eaves, Gerber, and Tanabe on the second, Sanford, Sakic, and Kauppanen on the third, and then Austin, Pisani, and Roach on the fourth line there. On defense, Korolyuk and Bure always been together. They've been fantastic. Ludeman and Hedican on the second pairing this year, and then Pat Hennessy, who we just drafted 2 years ago, and Arvidsson there on the third pairing. And finally, we would have Connor Perreault backed up by Ballet there in net. So for the 2040/41 regular season, the Edmonton Oilers would produce a record of 56, 21, and 5 for 117 points, winning yet another President's Trophy. This has to be like 10 to 12 President's Trophies now in this franchise mode. So for team scoring, Duke Bickle would lead the way with 118 points. 5 different players on the Oilers would produce over 100 points this season, including Vitaly Bure, Cody Zinger, William Eaves, and Stephen Mitchell as well. For the entire league, Mark Lamoureux, at 36 years old, the franchise playmaking winger in St. Louis, would put up 126 points, 89 assists. Pedro Chipchura finishing high there too, but he is on a great team there in Nashville. As far as the playoffs went, Edmonton would go all the way yet again this year, winning rounds 1 and 2 against Vancouver and San Jose in 5 games apiece, just barely squeaking by the St. Louis Blues in 7 games in the conference finals, and then finally beating out the Boston Bruins for another Stanley Cup in 7 games. As far as the draft lottery goes, the Arizona Coyotes would move from pick 6 to 1, Anaheim down from 1 to 2, and Chicago up from 5 to 3. As far as player awards go this year, we would see Lamoureux win the Art Ross. He would also win the Hart Trophy this year. Vitaly Bure would win another Norris this season. Chipchura with yet another Lady Byng. Heino in Boston would win the Calder. Zinger would win the Conn Smythe on Edmonton's playoff run this year. Ballet, who I think was actually supposed to be Perreault, a weird one here, won the Vezina. I believe it was supposed to be Connor Perreault, as Perreault also wins the Jennings this year. He had a much better season than Marion Ballet. Gill in Calgary wins the Masterton. Jack Adams goes to Nashville's coach. Reitz wins the Selke there. Lamoureux wins the Ted Lindsay, and Boyle wins the Rocket. And as far as retiring players went this year, we see Sergei Svitov, a power forward there, retire with 1,466 points. Anton Lundell, Marco Abb, McDonald, Svedberg, and Kron all with over 1,000 points, and then a couple players right around the 800 to 900 point range as well. A notable name from the Oilers here, we would see Keith Spencer finally call it quits. 531 points in his NHL career. Not a bad player by any means, especially for a 211th overall selection way back in 2023. So heading into the 2041 NHL entry draft, the Edmonton Oilers would have their eyes on a player by the name of Cole Mahalik, a system-fitting offensive defenseman. So Edmonton would move Tellqvist, Ludeman, and Albrecht to the Chicago Blackhawks for the 3rd overall pick, Yas, as well as a 2nd round pick from the Rangers next year. So the Oilers would end up selecting Cole Mahalik with the 3rd overall pick. The 32nd pick there in Marcus Anderson, as well as Robert Hedstrom, would all be players to watch for the upcoming couple seasons. As far as the re-signing phase goes, everybody in Edmonton would re-sign their contracts. There would be no issues there. Edmonton would also have some additional cap space to sign Cristiano Sarno. The Oilers would also sign Joakim Lehtinen in free agency. The Edmonton Oilers would also trade Reed McAllister to the Carolina Hurricanes, as well as a 3rd round pick in exchange for 2 3rd round picks for the upcoming seasons. And Edmonton would also move Marion Ballet on his last year of his contract to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for a 2nd and a 3rd round pick. So for the lines this season, they would look fairly similar to how they have for the last little while. Only different, Spencer Roach moving over to center and Afinogenov coming back into the lineup this year. William Eves starting to drop off there rating-wise as well. On defense, same thing you've seen, except that Cole Mahalik is in this year, as well as Joakim Lehtinen. Those are the only changes to the Edmonton defense. And in goal, Walters would move up, as he is definitely NHL ready at this point, 80 overall at 20 years old, and Connor Perreault still maintaining that starting spot for the time being. So Edmonton's ratings this year would consist of 100 offense, 88 defense, and 86 goaltending. So for the 2041/42 regular season, the Edmonton Oilers would put up a record of 57, 20, and 5 for 119 points, just losing the President's Trophy to the Toronto Maple Leafs by a single overtime loss. For regular season scoring, Cody Zinger would put up 129 points, followed by Duke Bickell's 123. Eves and Mitchell would also have over 100 points each. For league scoring, Zinger and Bickell would lead the way. Pedro Chipchura just behind those two with 122 points. But definitely a lot of good players here produced from Edmonton draft picks. Connor Perreault, it was notable, also had 47 wins this season. Definitely one of the all-time records there, as he had a great year. So in the playoffs, the Oilers would go to 7 games in every single series they played, beating the Sharks in 7 games in round 1, then the LA Kings in round 2 for 7 games. Finally, the Colorado Avalanche would lose to the Oilers in 7, and then Edmonton would drop the Stanley Cup Finals to the Pittsburgh Penguins in Game 7. So for awards this year, Cody Zinger would win himself his first Art Ross Trophy. He would also win his first ever Hart Memorial Trophy. Vitaly Bure would win yet another Norris Trophy this year. Pedro Chipchura, yet another Lady Byng. Brodin would win the Calder this year in Dallas, putting up over 100 points. Hewitt would win the Conn Smythe for Pittsburgh. Forsstrom would win the Vezina in Pittsburgh this year, as well as the M. Jennings with Jekimov. Ritchie would win the Masterton. New Jersey's coach would win the Jack Adams this year. Reitz would win his 3rd Selke Trophy in a row. Zinger would win the Ted Lindsay. And Doyle would win back-to-back Rockets. So guys, for the draft lottery this year, we would see Anaheim win the 1st overall pick, Calgary would move from 3 to 2, and St. Louis would move from 7 to 3. For retiring players this year, we would see one of the all-time great goal scorers, Kari Hirvonen, retire with 1,034 goals and 1,650 points in 1,622 games, one of the best players ever there. A whole bunch of other notable names such as Lafreniere, Oda, Douglas, Long, and then a bunch of Edmonton retirees this year too, as we would see Connor Bell call it quits after 726 games with 357 points there. You could also see Clifford Mann second from the bottom with 261 points in 919 NHL appearances. And then finally in goal, we would see 3 big-name goalies retire. Will German with 483 wins, Turco with 358 wins, and then Parbacker with 617 goalie wins in 964 games in the NHL. So for the 2042 NHL entry draft, we would see the Oilers land a couple big name players by the names of Vitaly Tursunbayev, Roche, Briere, and Greer was also an elite goalie in there. Also keep an eye on Warren Fratton down there below. He was a very good steal. So in the offseason, Edmonton would re-sign just about everybody except for Mattias Arvidsson and a couple other players that just didn't make sense to sign at this point. The Edmonton Oilers would also end up making a trade here to send Spencer Roach and Morgan Pisani as well as Backlund, more for a cap dump trade than anything, to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for 2 third-round picks in the upcoming seasons. And in free agency, the Edmonton Oilers would offer Lane Pacioretty a 2-year, $4.5 million a year contract with the remaining cap space we had to, solidify the goaltending position. So for the upcoming season, the lineup wouldn't change too much. We would see a couple players grow significantly. Vitaly Tersunbayev and Marcus Anderson would be in the lineups this year. Marcus Mattias, I can't remember. Anyways, those 2 players being new names in the lineups. Everything else stays the same. On defense, again, very similar to last year. You've seen all these names before. This year, though, Pat Hennessy playing with Cole Mahalik on the second pairing for the +5 chemistry boost there. And then in goal, Walters would be up to an 85 overall at just 22 years old, and Lane Pacioretty had an 86 rated there that we signed him at. The Oilers would be bolstering a team rating of 98 offense, 88 defense, and 86 goaltending heading into the season. So as the season kicked off, it became fairly clear that Harrison Walters was going to be Edmonton's number 1 goalie, so the Oilers would swing a deal with the Vancouver Canucks, picking up 2 more third-round picks as well as Kozlov in net as a backup 82 overall starter in exchange for an 86 overall Lane Pacioretty. So to end off the 2042/43 regular season, the Edmonton Oilers would finish with a record of 47, 28, and 7 for 101 points, finishing 10th overall in the NHL this year. A bit of a down year for the Oilers, but not a bad season by any means. For team scoring, Duke Bickell would lead the way with 103 points, 44 goals, and 59 assists. The team leading scorer would be Cody Zinger there with 52 goals in the season. As far as league scoring goes, Pedro Chipchura would go off and have a 60-60 year, putting up 60 goals and 66 assists for 126 points. A lot of other big name scorers there that completely topped the Oilers players in every way possible. So in the playoffs, the Edmonton Oilers would go on another playoff run here, beating the Ducks in 7, then the Golden Knights in 6, finally beating the LA Kings in 7 games in the conference finals, and then going on to beat the Pittsburgh Penguins in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. In the AHL, we would see the Rockford Ice Hogs win back-to-back Calders, beating out the Lehigh Valley Phantoms in Game 7 of the Calder Cup Finals. So for the draft lottery this year, we would see Columbus move up to pick number 1 from number 2, the Islanders from 10 to 2, and Arizona down from 1 to 3. And as far as player awards went here, we would see Pedro Chipchura win the Art Ross, as well as the Hart Memorial. That's usually how it goes for player awards. The Norris would go to Fear this year in Colorado. Chipchura would win yet another Lady Byng. The Calder would go to Bergfors in Vegas this year. The Conn Smythe would go to Duke Bickell as the Oilers win the Cup. Soderstrom would win the Vezina this year. Soderstrom would also win the Jennings. Cons would win the Masterton in Minnesota. Philadelphia's coach would win the Jack Adams. Guerrero would win the Selke this season. Chipchura would also win the Ted Lindsay, as well as the Rocket Richard Trophy. And as far as retiring players went this year, we would see Trevor Wong being the most notable name retiring there with 1,647 points in 1,709 games. Lots of assists there for Wong. A bunch of other players retire with over 1,000 points there too. Probably not as many as you guys would recognize, but still some very good players in there. And we would see Esteban Hart, an Edmonton drafted goalie, finish with 567 games played and 262 NHL wins there. Olas would be the most notable goalie this year with 407 wins in his career. So for the draft this year, the Oilers would pick up a couple notable goaltenders there. As you can see, Leon, Germain, Lapierre, and Kolesnik, all going to be elite goalies that the Oilers were able to snag, which is absolutely absurd. Other notable names this year from the draft consisted of Scrimes, who was a later round steal in the 3rd round. Pedersen was a decent pick, and Cullen as well as Christie there were great picks for the Oilers as well. The Oilers would also go out and offer Alan McBain a contract here this year, as they needed a top 6 defenseman on the left-handed side. So guys, heading into the next season, the lineup would stay pretty much exactly the same except for Warren Fratton getting in on the third line now, +1 chemistry on all 4 forward lines there, as you can see. On defense, we would have pretty much the exact same lineup again except for McBain in there this year. That's the only difference there. And then we would have Walters backed up by Robinson this year in goal. For team ratings, the Edmonton Oilers would be bolstering 97 offense, 90 defense, and 84 goaltending heading into the season. So I missed the screenshot for it this season, guys, but the Oilers would put up a 51-28-3 record for 105 points, finishing 4th in the NHL this year. Cody Zinger would lead the team with 100 points this season, 46 goals, 54 assists there. So in the playoffs this year, the Oilers would beat the Golden Knights in 7 games. They would then go on to sweep the San Jose Sharks in 4 straight and then lose to the Nashville Predators in 6 games in the conference finals. Nashville would go on to win the Stanley Cup this year, beating the Hurricanes in 5 games. In the AHL, the Iowa Wild would beat the Lehigh Valley Phantoms in 7 games. And as far as player awards go here, Cope would win the Art Ross this season. We would also see him win the Hart Memorial Trophy as he would be the top scorer in the league. Fear would win another Norris for Colorado. Stevenson with the Lady Byng this year. Lamb would win the Calder as a franchise power forward. Chip Chura with the Conn Smythe. Markstrom would win the Vezina this year. He would also win the Jennings with McAllister. Cons would win back-to-back Mastertons this year. The Jack Adams would go to Phillies coach for the 2nd year in a row. Burnett would win the Selke this year. The Ted Lindsay would go to Cope, and the Rocket would go to Stevenson. Looking at the lottery, Arizona would finally win a draft lottery here. The Vancouver Canucks with the 2nd overall pick, and New Jersey would jump from 7 to 3 this season. As far as retiring players went this year, we would see Yuri Perez again retire with 1,622 points there. Brad Lambert, another big name there with over 1,400 points in his career. In goal, we would see Connor Lindros, Walton, and Witherspoon retire, as well as Leach with all right around 200 wins or so. Lindros with 325. So heading into the draft this year, the Oilers would make some blockbuster moves to improve their team for the final seasons here. We would send Hedstrom, Roach, Mitchell, McDermott, and a first to the Vancouver Canucks for the 2nd overall pick and the 34th overall pick this year. So the Oilers would also make a deal with the Anaheim Ducks to get Saren Heimo, a restricted free agent defenseman, as well as Pat Smith-Pelly, an old Oilers defenseman, and Brodziak, a backup goalie, in exchange for Greer, Lapierre, Hedekin, and then 2 late-round picks in this year's draft. So the Oilers draft would turn out looking like this. Gustafsson would be the biggest name to watch there, an 84 overall. Medium elite power forward, 84 overall is just crazy. LeBlanc would be a decent player. There's actually a lot of decent players in here, but none of these guys would really get a shot at the lineup apart from Gustafsson. So in free agency, everybody here would be re-signing. We would offer contracts to everyone. There was no issues there. The only issue is that Saren Heimo wanted so much money that we actually couldn't afford to pay, I believe it was Cody Zinger, so we had to move a couple guys around. Saren Heimo and Nielsen would get shipped off to the Panthers in exchange for Silvegaard, DeMarchi, and Coletta. Coletta being an 84 overall playmaking winger there. And the Oilers would also send DeMarchi, Smith-Pelly, and a 2nd round pick to Montreal in exchange for McCutcheon there. And those would be the deals the Oilers would pull off this offseason. So Harrison Walters was another, important signing to make. We didn't have enough money for him before those trades, so he would sign a deal there for the remainder of this franchise mode after those trades. So guys, heading into the final season, the 2044/45 season of this franchise mode, the Oilers roster would be looking like this. William Eaves down to a 78 overall at 38 years old. He has had a fantastic career in Edmonton, and we will be going over that very shortly, but Warren Fratton up to the top line. Kiiskanen on the lineup this year. Tyutin as well. Same with Gustafsson and Coletta. On defense, we would see Hennessy, Mahalik, Corley, Bure, and then McBain, Silvegaard, same as last year, and then Walters and Brodziak backing up Walters this year. So at the start of this season, William Eaves is currently sitting at 1,974 points in 1,637 games. He scored 958 goals and 1,016 assists heading into this season at just a 78 overall, but I think he can put up one more good season. This final season, the Oilers would be bolstering 95 offense, 92 defense, and 86 goaltending. And you guys also wanted a shot of Coach Connor here, so there it is. You can see Connor McDavid behind the bench, leading the Oilers to even more Stanley Cups, even if it's not on the ice at this point. So for the final season, the Oilers would put up a 59, 15, and 8 record for 126 points, an absolutely insane season again, and they would win their 12th President's Trophy this season. So William Eaves would do it. He would break Connor McDavid's point records here as far as actual points as an Oiler goes. He would score 75 points in this season as well as 45 goals in 81 games. So that is absolutely insane. He would finish with 1,718 games played, 1,003 goals in his career, and 1,046 assists for a total of 2,049 points, placing him second all-time in scoring, just behind, more than just, but behind Wayne Gretzky and ahead of Connor McDavid. So for team scoring this year, we would see Cody Zinger lead the team with 54 goals, 56 assists. Duke Bickle would have 93 points, and Cole Mahalik with 85 points as a defenseman this year. And for the league, you can see Cody Zinger finished right around the 7-8 mark around there. Cameron Clark just blew the league away this year with his line mates in Burnett and Chipchura. The Predators were insane. So for the playoffs, the Edmonton Oilers would sweep the Colorado Avalanche in round 1. They would beat the San Jose Sharks in 7 games in round 2, go on to beat the Winnipeg Jets in 5 games, and then would sweep the Philadelphia Flyers for their 11th Stanley Cup in this franchise mode. Absolutely insane. In the AHL, we would see the Chicago Wolves beat out the Utica Comets in the Calder Cup final in 7 games to win the Calder this year. So guys, for player awards this year, we would see Cameron Clark win the Art Ross. He would also win the Hart Trophy this year. Cole Mahalik would win the Norris this year with 85 points. Chip Churro would win yet another Lady Byng. The Calder would go to Frolov in New Jersey. Samuel Tanabe would win the Conn Smythe. Peltier would win the Vezina in Philadelphia there. Wirtanen and Lockhart would win the Jennings in Boston. Abstreetier would win the Selke there, I believe, or the Lady Byng. No, it was Lady Byng. The Selke would go to Pillman. The Ted Lindsay would go to Clark, and Vico would win the Rocket. And that would be it, guys. The franchise mode is now complete. That would wrap up a total of 25 seasons. Just an insane franchise mode here in Edmonton. So guys, at the end of this franchise mode, the Oilers would go down as probably the best franchise in all time, especially if things went the way they did here, especially with the modern era of hockey too. So the Edmonton Oilers would finish with 11 Stanley Cups in this franchise mode, 16 in total as a franchise, just insane numbers there, as well as 12 President's Trophies for a total of 14 since the award was created in 1988, I believe, as well as 14 Clarence Campbell trophies in this franchise mode. So 11 out of 14 for Stanley Cup Finals. That's pretty good. And 16 out of 21 in total. Also really good there. So just insane numbers overall. You can see in the 25 season, the Edmonton Oilers record of wins, losses, and OT losses would consist of 1,312 wins as a franchise, only 584 losses, and 154 extra time losses there. For all-time Oilers, William Eaves would complete 20 seasons as an Edmonton Oiler. That is just insane to even think about. He would also be the games played leader with 1,718 games played, and also the points leader with 2,049 points, and the goals leader. So 4 statistical leaders there just for William Eaves with 1,003 goals. Connor McDavid would be the Oilers' all-time assist leader with 1,180 assists. Kelly Buchberger would maintain the penalty minutes leader with 1,747. And the wins and shutout records would both go to Parbacker, as he would get 489 wins as an Edmonton Oiler and 42 shutouts in his career. So guys, that is going to be it for me. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you go down below, drop the like on the video. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. I would really appreciate it if you did, especially if you made it to the end of the video. I had over 15 video files, 15 audio files, and then 215 images or screenshots in this episode. So it would really be appreciated for me if you guys did go drop a like and do all that good stuff. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed. This is Etanyos signing out, and see ya.